Story 1. The people in this country who are most in need of awareness regarding what this administration is doing likely have little understanding of the situation and may not believe it. Story 2. It is absurdly foolish. We also imposed a 10% tariff on an island solely inhabited by our own military base. Thoughtful individuals. Story 3. I spoke with President Wobbles III today. It is sheer chaos as their canned sardine empire, built around the same product, is collapsing. Story 4. Kowalski, analysis. Skipper. It seems that an individual has imposed a tariff on our homeland. Diabolical. Story 5. It is a distraction from the real issues caused by tariffs. I'm sure the penguins will not be happy about the reduced demand for fish, but they are not going to come here and do something about it. Story 6. That sums up how much Trump and his associates understand the impact they are having on the global economy. Story 7. Norfolk Island, an Australian territory with a population of only 2,000, has a 29% tariff, nearly 3 times higher than the rest of Australia. They do not export any goods. Story 8. It seems like a strange jurisdictional issue because the World Bank does show a couple $1 million in trade with Heard Island and McDonald Islands. It's somewhat trivial to focus on this aspect. Clearly, it's a 10% rate across the board with some listed exceptions. It doesn't matter that they didn't make special exemptions for uninhabited areas. Story 9. The text illustrates how disconnected the plan is from reality. It reflects the entire world and stock market. This contributes to the panic, in my opinion. It is evident they lack understanding of their actions and intend to profit from the situation globally. Story 10. Some male penguins mate with other males. They will even raise young together. Story 11. It demonstrates the incompetence of the entire administration. Trump displayed loyalty to Putin by not including Russia on that list, which is truly shameful. Story 12. I am embarrassed that these individuals apparently copied the list of countries from a Wikipedia page. Story 13. I just watched March of the Penguins and Madagascar, and those characters are impressive. We should be concerned. Story 14. It's hilarious, and I will always remember it. However, it seems somewhat like clickbait if I'm correct. We taxed Australia or New Zealand, and that includes these uninhabitable islands. Story 15. When artificial intelligence automatically corrects place tariffs on Putin to place tariffs on penguins. Remember to always read what the AI generated before submitting your homework. Story 16. It's not about the penguins. Have a look at their other resources he will use as negotiation leverage. Story 17. He exempted Russia and its allies because they supposedly do not conduct enough business with the United States to warrant taxation, considering it is only a few billion. However, he then imposed taxes on multiple uninhabited islands and a U.S. military base. I believe that is the central issue here. Why exclude the entire world except for Russia, Belarus, and a few other problematic actors? Story 18. When you put an incompetent individual in charge of your country, you will encounter a significant amount of foolishness mixed with corruption and criminal behavior. Story 19. I find it both hilarious and sad that this is where my country stands today and this is what my fellow Americans voted for. Sometimes you just have to laugh to feel better. Clearly, science and knowledge are not this administration's strong points. Hopefully, we will survive until the next administration, where we can apologize to the world and hope for a second chance. I hope this will never happen again. Story 20. I feel like those penguins have taken advantage of us for too long. If they didn't want a fair retaliatory tariff, they shouldn't have allowed the trade deficit to reach its current level. Story 21. I heard that this was done to cover loopholes where ships could stop at these islands and change their port of origin to bypass the tariffs. Story 22. Trump is an idiot, and he is going to run the United States into a third world country. The rest of his Republican Party members are no better. Story 23. I believe these are tariffs against the countries that own those islands, and the media is trying to turn it into a narrative about America sanctioning penguins. This is precisely the reason Trump can act without restraint. The media amplifies trivial stories, And some people become so distracted by them that they fail to recognize when Trump is enacting policies that could harm them even more. Story 24. 20% of American adults do not know what a tariff is or who the president is. They have no opinion. Approximately 30% of Americans believe that the new tariffs make a lot of sense and that these policies will strengthen the American economy like never before. Ironically, most of this group would generally have been against tariffs or had no idea what a tariff was prior to around 2016. Around 30% are appalled and are preparing to vote en masse in 2 years to remove the Republicans from Congress. About 20% are also appalled and could have prevented this by simply voting last November but did not, either because the vice president was not ideologically pure enough on some single issue or because they were too distracted to vote. This is the state of the United States. Story 25. They compiled a list and set everything to a 10% minimum. This is why every country, including Russia and North Korea, has a 10% allocation. Story 26. It is now clear that these decisions were made using artificial intelligence. Musk and Trump need to be impeached. You should not use this kind of technology to make governmental decisions. Story 27. My plan was to settle there and store merchandise for import and export to the United States, but I guess I cannot do that anymore. Story 28. It is disappointing because I was planning to order 1,000 penguins. Seriously though, he is preventing anyone from moving manufacturing to any uninhabited areas. Story 29. Let it all burn. When he burns it down, the real revolution can begin. He has started a civil war that will end in bloodshed. The fastest way to motivate your constituents to revolt is to leave them poor and hungry. Story 30. Every day, I think to myself that they can't get any dumber, and every day they prove me wrong. I dislike it here. Story 31. It reinforced the fact that Trump and his associates have no plan and no idea what they are doing and do not really care. Not one person could be bothered to vet the list. Story 32. I love penguin jokes. My serious answer is that the tariff on an uninhabited island is silly, but not worth spending too much time thinking about, considering there are real issues facing Americans and, by extension, the world economy. Story 33. It seems strange. Why would individual islands be chosen instead of the nations that have sovereignty over them? Story 34. People want to elect individuals they perceive as similar to themselves into positions of power. If you tend to rely on a chatbot to do your work for you, then this is the government for you. Story 35. It frustrates me as this shows how little thought Trump actually put into this. Forget them, penguins, but Putin is acceptable. Story 36. As an American, while this is a reflection on the expertise in Washington, D.C., a 10% tariff on Penguin Island is my least concern and the last thing currently on my mind. The attention this footnote is receiving is astonishing. Story 37. Add it to the ever-growing list of things that prove without a doubt that the racist and inappropriate president is also a complete fool. Story 38. I cannot think of one single rational adult United States citizen who believes that any of this is a good idea, emphasizing the importance of being rational and mature. Story 39. Donald Trump is by far the least qualified person to ever hold the office of the presidency. Story 40. It is likely that I am asking the wrong people, as it has been proven that 70% are either uninformed or unmotivated. Now, I will wait for responses. Story 41. I thought it was an Onion article at first until I saw the source reporting it. Not even Idiocracy was this foolish. Story 42. About time. The lazy rich elite lounging around in their tuxedos won't even try. They expect to go for a swim and simply find fish without putting in any effort. They deserve everything they get. Story 43. Penguins were asking for it. In other news, I am selling my home and moving to California. I need to be in a place that is fighting this, not submitting to it. Story 44. As strange as it sounds, my first thought was, who used that island as an address? This is the only reasonable explanation for why it would be on the list, aside from simple incompetence, which is equally plausible. Story 45. It's the only tariff we can afford, so I'm all in. It helps that penguins are adorable, albeit smelly. Story 46. It is becoming increasingly difficult for me to distinguish between an article from The Onion and real-life headlines. Story 47. Is the whole penguins living in Wales thing an unforeseen consequence of Trump's tariff regime? Story 48. If they chose to wear casual clothes instead of black and white suits every day, they could have avoided being noticed. Story 49. I don't know. Maybe it's a way to avoid making the country a shipping hub for sending goods to the United States from other countries to bypass high tariffs. Just like how China started sending goods to the United States through Mexico to evade high tariffs. I could be wrong, though. Story 50. The most fair assessment is that it was done to prevent countries from relocating export licenses to those islands to evade tariffs. Story 51. If we can place some of our military bases in the United States, we can negotiate about the tariff. Otherwise, we will be forced to take immediate action. Story 52. The cast of Happy Feet has been very unfair to us. They flood our markets with regurgitated mackerel, and we do not tariff it. Not anymore. Story 53. Look, it's not about being inhabited solely by penguins. It's that they didn't say thank you. And don't get me started on whether those are tuxedos. Story 54. Let's keep people focused on an island full of penguins instead of realizing how these tariffs are actually being distributed. There is nothing to see here. Story 55. This reminds me of the beginning of the movie Major League when they are in the boardroom. This guy is dead. Cross him off, then. Story 56. Well, it sounds like it has no effect, so I feel nothing, except for the enjoyment I get from people expressing their frustration about it online. Story 57. Or the 20% of an island only inhabited by a United States military base. Tariffs so high we owned ourselves. Story 58. Except that it is really stupid. The only reasonable explanation, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, is that other countries are not able to circumvent tariffs. However, it is simply plain stupidity. Story 59. It's about time. Those annoying tuxedos have been taking advantage of us for decades. When they make mistakes, it will have to be a significant error. Story 60. I believe it's time to stop letting these penguins take advantage of our beautiful country. Story 61. I trust those penguins to be more sensible than the current administration in the United States. Story 62. Is there fishing near the island or any other resource collection? The tariffs are based on the origin of the products, not the nationality of the owner, so there may be fish collected there that are sold in the United States. Alternatively, he might just be misguided or perhaps a combination of both. Story 63. It exemplifies the unserious and misguided approach to economics by the individual known as Cheeto Boy and his group of opportunists. Story 64. It is humorous to joke about, but it does not diminish the frustration and anxiety that the administration continues to cause. Story 65. The economic power of the tariffs will push the penguins towards China, where the influx of additional penguins will undermine the Chinese fishing industry. You do not understand that Trump is playing a complex strategy here. Story 66. I am not conservative by any means, but if he is going to implement tariffs, he might as well apply them universally. This approach would prevent smuggling or the creation of fake businesses under false pretenses. However, he has made exceptions for Russia and North Korea, which seems misguided. Story 67. While trying to educate myself, I found it interesting that if the islands are uninhabited, how were their goods coming out of them? According to export data from the World Bank, the islands have, over the past few years, usually exported a small amount of products to the United States. But in 2022, the United States imported $1.4 million from the territory, nearly all of it unnamed machinery and electrical products. Story 68. I am more disgusted that he decided to play golf after wrecking the stock market and has chosen not to meet the plane in Dover with the remains of the 4 soldiers who died overseas. Story 69. I'm guessing that Trump is still upset about his Club Penguin account being banned. Our stable genius must have really liked Club Penguin. Story 70. After watching the Penguins of Madagascar movie, I understand why the orange Cheeto is trying to fend off the penguins. Story 71. I heard that the penguins are going to retaliate with a 50% tariff against United States goods. They are also dissatisfied with Trump's actions. Story 72. Prepare for a massive penguin military invasion. They do not tolerate political rhetoric if offended. They understand only actions. Story 73. A 10% tariff on an island inhabited only by penguins is utterly ridiculous. They deserve an 80% tariff on whatever they import. Whatever it is, 80% minimum. Story 74. I look forward to the surge in the pebble-based economy. I keep imagining them waddling out to an iceberg, their little flippers clutching fancy rocks to set them adrift for a pickup. Story 75. It would have been funny if 2 months ago Trump placed a tariff on just this island and declared it a win for his administration. This shows how thoughtless this administration is. Story 76. About the same way I feel about the constant posts asking how Americans feel. It's frustrating to witness. Pollsters are eager to gauge the opinions of the American public. Story 77. I certainly care a lot more about the 20% on the European Union, but everyone seems to really want to talk about the penguins. Story 78. Do you mean the one that is part of Australia? I feel the same way about it as I do about the 10,000 other uninhabited islands that are subject to tariffs because they are part of Canada. Story 79. As a penguin, I have to say, a long time ago, I can still remember when that presence used to make me smile. I knew that if I had my chance, I could make it dance, and maybe it would be happy for a while. But February made me shiver with every presence I delivered. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step. I can't remember if I cried. Story 80. Can someone point me to a list of these places? Issues like this are difficult to search for. Story 81. I am unable to view or process images or links. However, if you provide the text you would like me to edit, I can certainly help with spelling, punctuation, and any other corrections. Story 82. I feel like someone asked a language model for a list of places with the least trade with America, and no follow-up was done to check the work. Story 83. Not American, but my assumption is that it has a fishing industry with its exclusive economic zone, so anything caught in that area has a tariff applied to it if sold to the United States. Story 84. They also impose tariffs on Diego Garcia, which is located in the British Indian Ocean territories. It is home to a joint United Kingdom-United States airbase that our bombers have been using since the 1970s and has been critical to our operations in the Middle East and Eastern Africa. There are no exports or commercial operations on the island. Story 85. Those penguins need to pay. They are running their operation and taking advantage of American citizens. They need to pay, and when I say they need to pay significantly. Story 86. I am not surprised by the actions of the regime. Their ineptitude is a mixed blessing. They are cruel and efficient, but they lack intelligence, so nothing is effective or built to last. Story 87. Those penguins have to pay for their resources. Access to ice, land, water, and fish. They have been relying on the United States for too long. Story 88. It shows that whoever made that decision obviously did no research. I am fairly certain that all of the numbers came from an artificial intelligence language model, likely Grok. We have an incompetent executive branch whose terrible ideas are exceeded only by their dictatorial impulses, and America suffers immensely. Story 89. This theory suggests that it has nothing to do with the economy and is, in fact, a tool used to compel businesses and companies to pledge loyalty. Story 90. I'm starting to think that the island was placed on the list as a gesture of defiance towards Trump by the people responsible for creating that list. Story 91. I want to move there with the penguins. They seem like they will be less foolish than the person who suggested this was a good idea. Story 92. The wealthy student in class who paid someone to do his school projects is now in charge of the entire country. I was a financial aid scholarship student at a private school. Story 93. The penguins have had it entirely too easy. Time to pay in fish. Not up to date on penguin currency. Probably fish. Story 94. I am waiting for this country to fall like the Roman Empire. It is painfully slow, and it is obvious that everything is deteriorating under the rule of a deranged leader. Story 95. We feel that all the tariffs are unreasonably foolish, similar to the orange oligarch. Story 96. Honest answer. I think someone just sat down with a list of who has what by country. If omitted, it would actually be a clever way to avoid tariffs. Free on board from a desolate country to wherever. Obviously, it would need to be more economical than the tariff, but it could be feasible. Not an exact example, but Argentina does not allow payment out of the country until goods arrive at the port. This makes it difficult to buy equipment from Europe. So we make payments from an account in Europe to the vendor. Then when it arrives in Argentina, we make the payments from there. The vendor then credits back the European account. Absurd as it may seem, but that's how it goes. Story 97. Tariffs on penguins? That's absurd. Or is it? These penguins might be secretly plotting to take over the world. I think they need their own tax-free zone to fund their plans. Story 98. How do you think we feel? You are on Reddit asking the people who did not vote for this. These posts are targeting those whose views likely align with your own. This is a pointless exercise. Story 99. It's a way of informing countries that they cannot evade tariffs simply by using a second location and relabeling their products as being made there before shipping to the United States. Story 100. Thank you for bringing it up. It has disappeared from mainstream news. It would be funny if the entire situation were not so incredibly bad. Story 101. How can you mess up this badly? By firing too many people and then trying to rehire them while imposing tariffs on penguins. The former president and his team are hard at work. He needs to reconsider before signing anything. Story 102. There is something suspicious about those penguins. They are always marching somewhere in their fancy tuxedos. Something is going on. Leave the tariffs on. Why don't they head to warmer climates in winter like other birds? There are too many questions. Story 103. The penguins have been impacting America for years. It's time for America to respond. Story 104. If there are any Metalocalypse fans out there, you'll remember the episode where they film Blood Ocean. It's a huge disaster, and the producer tells them that they have a difficult situation on their hands. All that's left to do is look into the camera, smile, and say, "This situation tastes great." Story 105. My favorite is the island inhabited only by a military base, which enacted tariffs on its own people. Story 106. Well, that island shouldn't be shipping products to the United States if they don't want tariffs. It's part of Australia, and their fisheries are active. I'm not sure why it shipped from the island and not Australia. Story 107. We are showing those penguins who the boss is. They wouldn't dare raise a flipper against us. Story 108. Why are we trading with penguins? First, they are white and then they are black. Which one is it? For a long time, I thought they were white, but now they are saying they are black, and I don't trust those black birds. Story 109. The remaining times I can enjoy lucrative free-range organic penguin split-breast meals are limited now. Story 110. You may find it amusing, but do you realize the trouble penguins from uninhabited islands can cause? They often take wooden nickels and get lost, making it difficult for them to travel alone. Once you see one, it will cry little tears and guilt-trip you into helping it get home. Unfortunately, you might end up taking it to the wrong pole due to a wrong turn in Albuquerque. Now it is literally crying ice cubes. Just thinking about the experience makes me feel like I am dying again. Story 111. I am extremely proud, experiencing a sinister and overwhelmingly euphoric landscape of futures in which I do not exist. I guess I have mixed feelings about those birds. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.